Now, from the Pope John Paul II Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Good evening. Great to see you all. Welcome to the World Over Live. Now, we've got a big show for you tonight. With the United States facing a default situation and a budget battle raging in D.C., we have an exclusive interview with the chairman of the House Budget Committee, Congressman Paul Ryan. He'll also react to the charges that his budget plan violates Catholic social teaching. And Father Robert Sirico, president of the Acton Institute, is here to give us his inimitable perspective on the latest news. And I'm sure he'll have something to say about the Ryan interview if I know him. And later, we'll give you the very latest information on Father John Corapi, a.k.a. the Black Sheepdog, with senior editor of the National Catholic Register, Joan, Frawley, Desmond. If you'd like to be part of the show, the number 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally 205-271-2980, or drop us an email, worldover@EWTN.com. Here's the brief. News from the world over this week. A week of intense budget negotiations in Washington abruptly ended when House Majority Leader Eric Cantor pulled out of talks with Vice President Joe Biden on a deal to raise the debt ceiling while lowering the deficit. Cantor said that they had reached an impasse over Democratic demands for tax increases. The GOP wanted more spending cuts. The Virginia Republicans said that the Republican-dominated House simply won't support tax increases. He's further urging President Barack Obama to directly weigh in on the Democrats' insistence on tax increases. Senator John Kyle of Arizona, sitting in for the Senate Republicans, also dropped out of the talks. White House Press Secretary Jay Carney downplayed the snag as merely an abeyance and said that they had been successful in identifying areas of common ground. More about the budget and the national debt in our next segment. And the head of the Vatican Bank is predicting a bleak future for the West if they remain on their current course. He says government spending efforts to revive the West's economic problems have only worsened the situation. Writing in the Vatican daily L'Osservatore Romano, Ettore Gotti Tedeschi added that the best way for the West to counteract the downward trend would be by increasing productivity and encouraging exports to the developing world. Tedeschi argued that countries that have chosen the path of public debt now will regret it later. And renewed sectarian violence in Northern Ireland this week. Pro-British paramilitary groups attacked Catholic homes and a church in Belfast. As riots escalated, as many as 400 Catholics and Protestants clashed in the small Catholic enclave of Short Strand, which sits in a predominantly Protestant area of East Belfast. Riot police eventually stepped in and were attacked as well. Catholic leaders said the violence was unprovoked, but Protestant leaders said the Protestants appeared to be retaliating for smaller-scale attacks by Short Strand youths on Protestant homes the night before. Political leaders have both denounced, on both sides rather, have denounced the violence. A separate bomb attack from dissident Republicans targeted police in West Belfast on Tuesday. As political discontent continues to grow in the U.S. and Italy over their respective roles in the NATO-led military action in Libya, the head of the Catholic Church in Libya says the people there are sick and tired of NATO's bombing campaign. Moreover, Bishop Giovanni Martinelli, apostolic administrator of Tripoli, told Fides news agency that the continued NATO bombings in Libya are playing into the hands of Muammar Gaddafi. Bishop Martinelli said that under the pressure of the bombing, Gaddafi is returning to be a reference point for people who right now feel the need for a leader, end quote. And Father John Corapi, the powerful preacher whose popular programming appeared on EWTN for the better part of a decade, announced this past week that he is leaving his priestly ministry. In March, Father Corapi was suspended from public ministry by his superiors over allegations of misconduct. At the time, Father Corapi said a former employee accused him of having a drug addiction as well as, quote, multiple sexual exploits with her and several other adult women. He said all the charges were false and has since filed a civil lawsuit against the accuser. Father Corapi cited the inability to clear his name through ecclesial means as his reason for quitting the priesthood. In response to the latest development, Network EWTN President and CEO Michael Warsaw said Father Corapi's decision makes it impossible for EWTN to return his programming to the airwaves. He further added that the network was deeply saddened by the news and offered the continued prayers of the EWTN family. More about this case later in the show. And the Vatican announced Saturday that it will host a major symposium to help bishops combat clergy sex abuse in their respective countries and dioceses. The meeting, planned for February, is designed in part to assist bishops in drafting clergy sexual abuse guidelines, which must be submitted to the Holy See. During the press announcement, Vatican's sex crimes prosecutor, Monsignor Charles Sciluna, acknowledged that some bishops and bishops' conferences have no interest in being forced into drafting guidelines. In reply to a question of what can be done when bishops are not being good shepherds, Monsignor Sciluna stressed that lay faithful have a duty to inform the Vatican via the papal nuncio when a situation of abuse is affecting the life of the diocese. He said the papal nuncios are there for the faithful, not to denounce their bishops or betray them, but to bring the faithful's concerns directly to the Pope. And finally, conditions continue to deteriorate in Sudan this week. The U.S. on Thursday submitted a request to the UN Security Council for 4,200 Ethiopian peacekeeping troops to be sent to the country's disputed Abyei region. As South Sudan's July 9th secession approaches, violence has been on the rise in several areas, particularly in the Abyei region, mainly due to oil rights and ethnic conflicts that remain unresolved. The UN said on Wednesday that 73,000 people have fled the southern Kordofan state after 2 weeks of fighting. We received a call today from Bishop Makram Gassis of the El Obeid Diocese. He gave us some disturbing news. He is hearing that the Islamic regime led by President Omar el-Bashir may be considering the use of chemical weapons on the Nuba people to quell the unrest. He also told us that the Khartoum regime is conducting bombing raids in the area that have caused many injuries, deaths, and the destruction of a radio station run by a Nuba relief organization. Bishop Gassis's hospital is being swamped with casualties, and the one doctor on staff is close to being overwhelmed. To date, at least 111 victims have been treated at Mother Teresa's hospital in Tourlet. The bishop is asking for volunteer doctors and medical personnel to pitch in and help. He also needs financial assistance to secure survival kits, medicine, and other medical supplies. If you'd like to be of service, go to bishopgassis.org or call 888-488-0348. It's a worthy cause and one that if you can help, you should get involved. It's terrible what's happening there. And with more time on your hands this summer, why not listen to some eternal words? The Truth and Life audio Bible is fully dramatized by a cast of world-renowned actors, Michael York, Blair Underwood, John Rhys Davies, and more. You can get your copy of the Truth and Life dramatized audio Bible at RaymondArroyo.com. Click on the banner at the top of the website. That'll take you to EWTN's religious catalog. And while there, you can also learn about my latest literary collaboration launching July 12th. I'll keep it a secret for now. Up next, my exclusive interview with U.S. Congressman Paul Ryan. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The U.S. Congress is in turmoil over whether to raise the debt ceiling and allow the government to borrow more money before August 2nd, the date when the government would default on its debt. My first guest has been sounding the alarm about the debt crisis for years, but now he's in a position to do something about it. Congressman Paul Ryan is the chairman of the Budget Committee in the House of Representatives. The House recently passed his budget plan, and it now awaits action in the Senate. In the meantime, some have hailed him as a visionary, while others, even some Catholics, have questioned whether his budget needlessly slashes funding to programs aiding the poor. During our exclusive interview with Paul Ryan, we tackled that question and discovered the personal side of the congressman that you may not have heard about. Take a look. I want to first start with your background. In Wisconsin, you still live in Janesville, right?
Yep. I live in the block I grew up on.
Really? Now, a lot of people don't realize in your background, and I didn't know this, and I've been following you for years. When you were 16, you walk in one day, and your father is there on the floor. Mm-hmm. This had to be a shock to you and the whole family.
Well, yeah, he was. I was the only one home at the time, and he died in his sleep of a heart attack. My mom was in Denver visiting my sister with my aunt, who had recently graduated from college and got a job out there. So.
Did it change your perspective on life?
It did. It did. It changed a lot of things. Yeah, absolutely.
You were. I was also in reading interviews with some of your siblings. They talk about the chores you all had to do at home. One of your chores was taking care of your grandmother. Who I guess, did she live with you?
Yeah, that was not true. After my dad died, my grandma moved in with us. She had Alzheimer's, and my grandfather had passed away by then.
Right.
And so she really couldn't take care of herself, and my mom and I took her in with us. And we were her primary caregivers. My mom went back to school to learn a skill, to start a small business. I was in high school. And so we had a nurse come during the day while we were both at school, and then at night, and every other time, my mom and I took care of her.
But I thought that has to change the way you look upon life,
Absolutely.
Upon the dignity.
I grew up fast. I did not, I was just a kid working at McDonald's that summer when my dad passed away. I was worried about whether I could catch a legal muskie that summer. Those are the things I worried about in those days.
Focused on,
Yeah, and I grew up fast. It was either sink or swim, and I decided to swim. And so I had a fast upbringing, I guess, because my mom and I, who became very close in those days, took care of my grandmother. Alzheimer's, can come in pretty fast, and deteriorates pretty quickly. And so I had a lot of experiences that a 16-year-old young guy doesn't usually have in life.
Has it sensitized you to the plight of people,
Absolutely.
particularly the people you're serving today, and those who are suffering right now without jobs, and are those people on the margins that so many seem to be concerned about?
Precisely. It's really kind of what got me into public policy. Economics, I fell in love with economics as a study, as a profession, and I also fell in love with public policy. I never planned on running. My goal was not to do this job. I wanted to go in the field of economics, but I got into public policy in the field of economics, and I basically learned you can really make a big difference in people's lives. And that is really what pulled me into this direction in public service.
Do you consider it a call, a vocation on your life?
Absolutely.
A moral calling?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
You wrote once, and you've taken some heat for it. You said Ayn Rand, more than anyone else, did a fantastic job of explaining the morality of capitalism, the morality of individualism. Would you explain that as a Roman Catholic?
Sure. These are not mutually exclusive things. Now, first of all, she, through her novels, and we'll get into objectivism if you want to, but through her novels, did a very good job of defending the morality of the free enterprise system, of the dignity of the human person.
And dramatizing it.
And dramatizing it. Look. There's this weird urban legend out there about, people who read Ayn Rand novels are somehow crazy objectivists. Objectivism, by definition, requires atheism.
Yeah.
So how on earth can a devout Catholic consider themselves as an objectivist? I don't, and Catholics don't. But that doesn't mean everything she ever wrote in her novels, not her philosophy, but her novels, were wrong.
It does frame your sense of what this system is, and how some people are there merely to take from others and abuse them.
That's right.
So is that what you were talking about?
I mean, she writes in characteristic, and she basically writes in broad strokes, over dramatizes points, plays them out to the nth degree, but they do a good job of sort of highlighting for a young person these dramatic differences.
Right.
Look, the blessed Pope John Paul the Great said, the human being is an end in and of himself, not a means, not a subject, not an object. Right. The dignity of the human person is the moral foundation of Catholicism and of many other ideals and philosophies that are the basis of the free enterprise system. And so to me, those ideals are in perfect keeping with the social magisterium, in perfect keeping of the dignity of the individual human being.
Let's talk for a moment about the letter you sent to Archbishop Dolan on April 29th. I'm first curious, why did you decide that you had to write or felt compelled to write a letter to Dolan explaining, if you will, your budget, which had already passed the House or on its way to passing the House, in the context of Catholic social teaching? Why did you feel you had to do that?
Well, first of all, I don't think you can separate your values and your religious beliefs with your day-to-day public service. You know, some people say things like that, but I don't see these things as separable. Number one, they inform you. Number two, we got a letter earlier from Bishops Blair and Hubbard,
right?
Which it was really in response to that letter. Archbishop Dolan is the chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, so I just thought that he was the proper person to write to. And I also sent one to my own bishop, Bishop Morlino in Madison. I'm in the Madison diocese. And so to me, I wanted to show that this is a matter of prudential judgment, but that there is plenty of room for conservatives and liberals, I use those in modern terms, within the social magisterium, and it is a matter of prudential judgment on how we apply these principles. The principle of subsidiarity, the principle of the preferential option for the poor, solidarity, the dignity of the human person. These are all extremely important principles within the social magisterium that public officials should be thinking about as they design public policies. And things like budgets, such as what we write, are matters of prudential judgment. And I think it's extremely important that we highlight how these things are our prudential judgment and how we apply such principles. Now, and they're important principles.
Yeah, and Archbishop Dolan underscored a lot of
this.
Subsidiarity, prudential judgments, which people misunderstand.
They do.
A preferential option for the poor
does not mean a preferential option for the state.
Or a government program.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I read somewhere.
Preferential option for the poor, it's not just a material thing, it's also a spiritual and moral thing. What kind of people do we want to be? What kind of country do we want to be? Do we want a country of people who are making the most of their lives, who have equal opportunity to be dignified, to have flourishing lives, to be productive, to be self-fulfilling and flourishing? Or are we going to design government programs that end up draining and sapping people of their incentive and their will to make the most of their lives? A system where we have a majority of takers versus makers, I would argue, does injustice to the poor. What we want to do is perfect our goals of upward mobility in society, of equal opportunity, and therefore the resulting prosperity that results from the kind of system that encourages those things.
But some of your opponents on the other side of the aisle, some fellow Catholics, look at the budget and they say, right, he's slicing into some of these programs designed for the poor. Right. You would say what in response to them?
A debt crisis will hurt the poor, the first and the worst. We're going to have a debt crisis. Let me say, this isn't just me saying this. Every independent fiscal authority in government and outside of government says Washington is on a collision course and we will have a debt crisis. The CBO gave us a report this morning saying that. And so those programs that are the drivers of our debt that are going insolvent, the social safety net itself is going bankrupt, is shredding at the seams. You've got to make these programs solvent if you're going to avoid a debt crisis, which means economic growth goes down, we have an economic crash, and the people who need the government the most, the people at the safety net, the elderly, the poor, are the ones who are going to get hurt the first and the worst. And so what this budget attempts to do, very, very clearly, is preempt and prevent a debt crisis, focus and target government's assistance to those who need it most, a safety net for the poor, for the sick, for people who are temporarily down on their luck, or for people who really, truly can't help themselves. And across government, we proposed a means test government spending, meaning don't subsidize corporations with corporate welfare or wealthy individuals with benefits, and target government support to the people who need it the most. What we're trying to do is fix the welfare system so that it isn't designed to keep people on welfare, but get people back on their feet into lives of self-sufficiency, into flourishing lives where they can compete and thrive and survive, and to get their children to have a better standard of living. That's what's going to happen if we preempt a debt crisis. If we have a debt crisis, our kids are worse off. The people who depend on the government the most get cut the first.
At the heart of your plan is your plan to remake Medicare. And
it's to save Medicare, I would argue.
Save it by remaking it. And give us a sense, it has been callously and I think erroneously described as a voucher program.
That's actually incorrect.
You reject that terminology.
Well, not only do I reject it, the Congressional Budget Office rejects it.
Explain to people in a nutshell, what will this plan do?
So in a nutshell, first of all, Obamacare ends Medicare as we know it. As you know, the President's health care law, which is in law, takes $500 billion from Medicare to spend on this other government program. Second, it puts a board of 15 bureaucrats, unelected, unaccountable, in charge of price controlling and therefore rationing Medicare to current seniors. I don't think the government should be putting itself in a position, without even the consent of elected representatives, of determining what seniors can and cannot get. That is, to me, a role the government should not have, or power it shouldn't have. We repeal the rationing board, we stop the rating of Medicare, and we say, Medicare made a promise to people who are currently retired. It should keep its promise. And so we cash flow that promise. We don't change the Medicare benefit, the Medicare current structure, for anybody 55 and above. But in order to do that, you have to reform it for our generation, those 54 and below, because it is going bankrupt in 9 years, according to the CBO, or by 2024, according to their trustees. So Obamacare doesn't save it from bankruptcy, raids the program, rations the program. We end that. We save it from bankruptcy. But the way in which we propose to reform it for the 54 and below crowd, so that we can cash flow the promise to current and near seniors, is to have a system called premium support. A voucher is you get a check in the mail, it goes to you, and you take that check and you go buy something with it. That's not what this is.
Okay.
Medicare premium support, like I have as a congressman, or like Medicare Advantage works today, or Medicare Part D works today, is Medicare gives you a list of guaranteed coverage options to choose from. You pick your plan, and then Medicare subsidizes it. And what we say is don't subsidize wealthy people nearly as much as middle-income people, and give a larger subsidy, about $8,000 more a year, to the poor. And as people get sicker, increase their subsidy to prevent them from going poor because they get sick. So more for the poor, more for the sick, less for the wealthy. That makes Medicare solvent for the next generation, saves it for bankruptcy, and gives us the ability to cash flow it for the current generation.
Congressman, you've been talking about this plan for months now. I know
working on this for years.
And I know you've been working on it for years and talking about that for years. It passed the House. It's not going anywhere in the Senate. The polling is this. CNN, 58% oppose the plan. Reuters, 43% oppose. Among the elderly, 74% opposing this plan. How do you overcome those public appetites?
I've seen just as many polls saying the opposite if the polls are worded correctly. So that's the deal, the truth. Are you accurately describing what we're proposing? If you are, actually we do well. More importantly, what people don't realize is measuring this against the status quo, unsustainable, bankruptcy. The President's health care law, putting a rationing board in charge of the program, which affects current seniors, taking money from the current program to fund another program, compromising current seniors, accelerating bankruptcy. These are the things that when people realize are the choices, polls do quite well. So the point here is we gotta get the truth out, we gotta get the facts out. And unfortunately, our partners on the other side of the aisle have decided to use this as a political weapon to lie, scare, and mislead seniors, to try and scare them into voting for them. And if that actually ends up happening at the end of the day and we don't fix this problem, you know what? Then we have a debt crisis. Then we have austerity, just like you have in Europe. And guess what? Then the government's going to have to cut current seniors. Then we're going to have to cut the people who depend on the government the most, the people who've already retired and are relying on these promises.
Now, I want to talk to you about the political dimension here. Donald Trump has said this is a death wish for the Republican Party, and it could mean the end of a majority in the House of Representatives. Your plan?
We don't see it that way. I don't know Donald Trump, never met the guy. I'm not sure that he understands what it is we're proposing, but more importantly,
well, it's not what you're proposing, it's the way it's being spun in public,
and the way
it's being understood and accepted abroad. And you have a competitor in your own district who's claiming, he's created a website, keep your paws off my grandma.
Here's the great thing that we learn. As soon as senior citizens realize that they've been lied to, which in this case they are, they don't take kindly to the people lying to them. Seniors, I've done over 500 listening sessions on this issue. I just did 19. Once seniors realize what it is we're actually proposing, They want us to succeed. They want us to fix this problem. Here's the point that I disagree with Donald Trump and others like this. We're elected to lead. We are elected to see problems and fix them before they get out of our control. And so let me ask you this. I always tell people, 2008, we had this fiscal crisis, financial crisis. We got a recession. Millions of people lost their jobs. Trillions of dollars of wealth were gone. What if your congressman saw it coming? What if he knew why it was going to happen, and what he needed to do to prevent it from happening and had the time to do it? But he decided not to do it because somebody was going to run some negative ads against him, because it wasn't good politics. What would you think of him? That's exactly where we are right now. This is the most preventable and predictable economic crisis. We need to deal with the fact that Medicare is going bankrupt, Medicaid's going bankrupt. They're the biggest drivers of our debt in the future. And if you don't tackle these challenges now, they're going to tackle us. If we don't deal with it now, then we will have a debt crisis, and then those very people who rely on these important programs will get their benefits cut after they've retired. So the responsible thing as a leader is to see the facts for what they are and fix these problems before they get out of our control, regardless of the fact that other people might, through political opportunism, lie to try and convince people to vote against you. If you govern yourself that way, based upon lies others might tell about you, then you have no business serving in public office, in my opinion.
Final question. How does your Catholic faith sustain you, particularly in these dark moments?
Yeah. Very well. First of all, my parish priest is a great guy. I love my priest. We go to St. John Vianney in Janesville. It's where I was baptized. Very well. It sustains me quite well. I just was going back and rereading Without Roots that Marcella Pera and then Cardinal Ratzinger wrote. Again, an atheist politician, Italian, and a cardinal writing a book together about how moral relativism undoes society. So there are common themes from different philosophies that centralize around moral certainty, absolutes, the dignity of the human person, and that's the point that I've been trying to make with our doctrine. The social magisterium is wonderful. It informs us, and it gives us power, and it gives us sustenance to go forward and be good public servants to try and fix these problems. I want an America that will continue to be defined by upward mobility, equal opportunity, and prosperity, and a system that doesn't turn able-bodied people into subjects of the state, but helps able-bodied people who have not seen success in their life before, get it so that they can flourish.
Our thanks to Congressman Ryan and his staff. To discuss the Ryan interview and other news this week is the president of the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty, our regular World Over contributor, Father Robert Sirico. Good to have you back.
Good to be back.
As always.
Thank you.
I want you to react to what you heard from Paul Ryan there. You obviously have a Catholic layman wrestling with the Catholic teaching and trying to apply it to his vocation.
Leaving aside for a moment all of the policy wonk stuff that you can see that what animates him is his faith, that's what it's all about for him, the vulnerability of people and how we can use our civic positions to protect the poor. And I think it's scurrilous, the kinds of attacks against a man like that, especially by people who don't evidence that kind of erudition, that kind of formation in the faith when they are formulating their policies. So it really, I think you've done the church in the United States a very good service by having that interview.
Well, you'll remember a few weeks ago, and I'm sure our audience will as well, there were a group of Catholic academics who said, this is totally, you are violating Catholic teaching. And they said that not only to Paul Ryan indirectly, but to John Boehner directly, another Catholic, the Speaker of the House. Your thoughts on this and how people can come away with that impression? Because they are cutting into and will inevitably cut into some of these welfare programs that do indeed help the poor.
Well,
is that an abdication of Catholic principle and Catholic social teaching?
I wrote 2 articles in response to it, and I will give you the soundbite response now, because that's what we do here, the executive summary. And it's to put it this way, that not all of the programs that are intended to help the poor, and that what Catholic social teaching binds us to are a set of principles, not a set of political policies which depend upon prudential application. And people can have good disagreements. The egregious thing about the statement from those 85 or so Catholic academicians to Bonner when he spoke at CU was that they tried to, well, what they did basically was collapse the application of social teaching into doctrine and dogma. And I think that's a very dangerous thing, because then what you end up having is a theocratic situation where the church pronounces on an issue and it must be translated. It's a kind of Catholic Sharia law, and that's just not part of what the Catholic Church teaches. Jesus makes a distinction between God and Caesar. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God. There's a legitimate sphere of even secular, in a sense, this is what the Holy Father has said, a secular application.
Yeah. In this battle, I mean, this budget battle is so pitched here in D.C.
Yes.
Because the stakes are so high. I mean, this thing's about to come down. You have the markets are going crazy. You've got hundreds of points being lost in a day. Our credit rating is in the tank. Something clearly needs to be done. What if these parties can't come together? How dire is it for the debt ceiling not to be raised? What does that mean?
Well, I heard one person who's involved in the negotiations use this metaphor. If your daughter is out overspending on the credit card when she's at college, what do? Do you call the bank and raise the limit? Or do you cancel the credit card or maintain the limit so that she can't use the credit card? And that's exactly what's going on. I think it will be bad. It's not a good thing, certainly, that we would end up having to default. I don't think it will come to that, because that will be a political catastrophe.
That will damage the credit rating further, though, yes?
It will. But if we continue to raise the debt limit and the ceiling and just go ahead and raise taxes, we will permanently cripple the economy. Part of the reason the markets are going insane and business is having a problem is that it can't predict what the bills are going to be next week, because we've all seen the fluctuation, for instance, in petroleum rates, the cost of gas.
Well, today, on Thursday, Eric Cantor and John Kyle, the two Republicans, have basically walked away from these negotiations. What happens now? And are you in a position where it looks like Boehner and Obama are going to have to come to some agreement here?
Well, one hopes that that's what politics is about, but I think that there is a real danger of raising taxes, which is what I understand the Democrats primarily to be advocating. Their solution is to just keep going and raising taxes, not to allow the disciplines of the market to work within the economic system.
But their idea is if you collect more taxes from the wealthy who can afford it, you can then spend it to stimulate the economy.
Well, we'll get to the stimulation of the economy in a moment, but it is a fallacy to think that you can just appropriate. If you appropriated all of the wealth of all of the people of $500,000 and above and all of their businesses, you would get to about 6 months of solving the immediate problem. And then you wouldn't even have that money to draw from, because all of the infrastructure, the economic infrastructure, would have been redistributed. What we have to do is allow the economy to become more productive, and the way you do that is to reduce regulation, which is a form of taxation, and to reduce taxation itself.
The Vatican Bank, the head of the Vatican Bank this week in L'Osservatore Romano, Gotti Tedeschi, said, many think the individual states, it's caught in the margin here, need to intervene in order to resolve economic problems. But that happens with an increase in public debt. Countries that have chosen this path now regret it. Others have not taken that road thanks to their politics, which are more attentive to the budget. What is he saying there?
Well, he's saying exactly what I was saying. And I have to, disclaimer, I know Signor Gotti Tedeschi is the head of the Vatican Bank, as you said. He has a very good head on his shoulders. He's a prominent Italian banker. And he points out that when tax burdens become unbearable, you impede the progress of the economy. What we need to do is lower taxes, free up the economy, and concentrate on our economic advantage, which is the development of technology.
Mm-hmm. What is the lesson from Europe as far as the stimulus plans are concerned? From what I'm hearing on the Hill, that is the solution the administration will be backing. Yes, we'll offer you some cuts in spending, but we need to spend more and invest in the future and stimulate the economy.
Then why offer cuts in spending? If we're going to do that, we're going to become Greece. There's this whole character formation, this moral formation that goes on at the same time. You can't radically separate economics from a moral character where people will come and keep demanding, and when you have too many people who are at the government trough, then the productive people, you'll pardon the expression, shrug. No. I'm glad, by the way, that you got Paul Ryan to talk about Atlas Shrugged.
The Ayn Rand thing, because Ayn Rand was an atheist, pro-choice. I mean, she was really a horrible person.
She was.
When you break it down.
But the point is, the intriguing point about Rand is that she attempts to appropriate natural law and use that and place it in a dramatic setting. And when you have young Catholics who do not have a good, solid formation, where for 30 or 40 years in our country and throughout the world, Catholic social teaching meant liberation theology, they're going to look for other alternatives. I'm glad to hear Ryan respond to those erroneous accusations against him.
Yeah, well, they're trying to somehow suggest that he's a heretic or something because he's read Ayn Rand or saluted her ideas.
Look at the people in the publications who are calling him a heretic and tell me that he's a heretic.
Okay.
I have been called a heretic as well.
Okay. I used to have an intern here. His name was Jack Heretic. He was actually a heretic. Let's go to Walter in Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Walter. What's your question? Real fast.
Good evening, gentlemen. Do you think that capitalism or socialism helped our Catholic Church?
So is there preference in the mind of the Church, Father?
The way it's put is that the Church condemns the root of socialism and some of the branches of capitalism. If you read the encyclical by John Paul II, Blessed John Paul II, Centesimus Annus, he says that he gives you a good and a bad capitalism, basically. And the good capitalism is the capitalism, or he doesn't like the word capitalism, free market, rooted in an ethical and juridical system, inspired by religious sentiment.
But one gets the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, he did condemn a radical capitalism, which is sort of what Ayn Rand is championing, yes?
Yes, exactly, and others like her. Capitalism doesn't believe in a juridical system and the rule of law. A capitalism that says that profit is its own moral indicator, that there is no higher ethical norm to which markets and deals have to be subordinated. So, yeah, that radical form of capitalism is what the Church rejects.
I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about some cultural issues. There was the U.S. Open was playing out this week here in Washington, and NBC Sports is airing it. And at the beginning of the event,
it was beautiful. The music was lovely. It was very patriotic.
They had Patriotic Open, and there the children saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And they decided to excise out of the pledge the under God portion of the pledge and the indivisible portion of the pledge. Your thoughts here? They say it was just somebody in the editing booth who took it out.
Yeah, of course. That's the point. On the face of it, it was edited. That's not the question.
We'll let people look at this and then we'll react.
And this is the greatest golf tournament in the world.
The Open Championship of the United States of America.
Oops.
Now, any third grader would catch that. The question is, why was it edited? And I suggest to you that there is an ethos, a culture around the major media outlets, major secular bias, where they think they could edit that out and maybe no one will notice it. We saw the president do that. When he speaks about those lines from the Declaration of Independence, where he says that we have certain inalienable rights endowed by our Creator, he edits that out. There is a secularist ethos a culture that needs to be confronted. And I'm glad that NBC apologized for it.
Oh no, well, there was an uproar this
Yes.
week. I mean, this is still a religious nation. People look at that and
Sure.
they get upset. The other part of
And
this
it was sneaky.
It was sneaky because it was the week that, earlier in the week, the Supreme Court rejected an atheistic
Precisely.
challenge
Right.
to the under God portion of the the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
My guess is some snarky editor thought, well, the
Exactly.
Supreme Court
and I
won't
hope
take
somebody
it out.
finds his name and publishes it on the web.
Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Well, write an op-ed on it or
Okay,
something.
there you go.
We'll bring him in here and interview him.
Yeah, well, that'll be fun. Let's talk about what we heard from the CDF this week.
Yes.
The Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith.
Yes.
Leaders there are saying, if you have a problem, particularly relevant to this sex abuse situation, if you have a problem and you're not getting the sufficient response from the bishop, you should go to the nuncio. Now, I know right now Archbishop Sambi is probably throwing his shoe at my head right now,
Yes.
because we're not encouraging people to write the bishop all of a sudden. The Archbishop.
Although his email address is...
Don't you do that. Don't you do that.
I'm joking.
But
I'm joking.
tell us what this means. What is the Vatican saying here?
The Vatican I think, is a very wise move to say, look, this is a very serious issue. It doesn't mean that you have to just go and complain about everything your bishop does, but you have an appeal to the Holy See, to the Pope himself, which is what the nuncio is. And so that if there is a serious case, you can make that appeal. It's showing the openness of the Church to hearing things that it needs to hear.
Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting email. This came in just from Eric moments ago. Galveston, Texas, he says, reformed Social Security in the late 1980s. What do you think of their reforms? Retirees in Galveston now receive 3 times the amount as the rest of the United States. I didn't know that.
I have heard about that, and I don't remember the details of it. I think it's a kind of private...
I think it's a
quasi-private, or a matching
public
fund, yeah. Chile is another example of that, yes.
It's often said that if the rich aren't taxed, jobs will be created. Why hasn't that happened since the wealthy have had tax breaks since George W. Bush when the financial crisis began, writes John from Florida?
Well, there are some tax breaks that have taken place and other things that have come in, and controls of the market and the dominance of entities like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae that controlled and distorted the market itself. It's not just not taxing the rich. What we're talking about is not taxing the productive engine of society.
Isn't it also this notion of a limited pie here? That the economy is only this big, so we've got to keep cutting it up and giving it to this one or that one.
It's called the zero-sum fallacy.
When indeed the economy has to be growing and thriving and organic and innovative. I was speaking to a social worker today. A woman spent 20 years working as a social worker. She said, our problem is we get so inundated by the bureaucracy. These people come in and we barely treat them as people anymore.
Right, you can't, and because the whole incentive system of a bureaucracy is to justify its budgets that have been allocated so as to ask for more the next time around. And it's a power play. You have to play politics in bureaucracies. Whereas in the market, you have to compete to be more productive.
Or charities, church-run charities. They care, you know, you go to Mother Teresa's house over here in the district.
Sure.
They care for these people one-on-one.
One-on-one.
It's tough love, it's direct, but they're loved.
Yes, indeed. And I think those are the models. And the more we can expand that, again, the principle of subsidiarity, the more we can expand it, the better the most vulnerable will be.
Let's talk about this story in Sacramento. Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish there has identified a list of inappropriate attire. They now have a dress code in Sacramento. No shorts, no straps, no skirts, short skirts. And one woman here says the worst thing I ever saw was a woman walked in wearing white pants that you could see through. And that prompted this dress code. What do you think of a dress code to come into Mass?
I think it's appropriate. There's a pastoral sensitivity here. In my own parish, I tend to talk about appropriate dress before the summer sets in, because I don't want to tell people who are sitting in the middle of church they shouldn't. It's really the breakdown of the culture, but it's not just women. Sometimes I've seen men very inappropriately dressed. I mean, I want to say to some of these guys, you know, your legs don't look like they looked when they were, you know, just why don't you just wear a nice pair of light trousers?
Yeah, please. And some we can't see through, I hope.
And by the way, in Europe, that's yes.
Yeah.
In Europe, you can't go into St. Peter's if you're.
No. Well, at Mother Angelica's shrine, you know, if you come up inappropriately dressed or not having enough on, they have paper pants and things they put on. Let's go to Rosemary very quickly. Rosemary, it's true. I'm not making this up. Go ahead, Rosemary, real fast. Rosemary? She's not there.
I'm just wondering why the Catholic Church, is the Catholic Church talking to Paul Ryan about politics?
Well, the Catholic Church isn't talking to Paul Ryan. I'm talking to Paul Ryan. But the Catholic Church is interacting with him via the head of the Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Dolan. And I think the point was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you have a Catholic layman who's attempting to bring to bear the Catholic social teaching, and there's a debate about whether or not this is indeed reflective of that Catholic social teaching. So that's why we brought him on the show, and you can decide, and everybody in the church, whether it comports or doesn't. That's your decision, I guess.
I do not. I'm a very devout Catholic, and I do not support him.
Okay. No, you know, this is a wonderful thing because we can have a variety of opinions on those kinds of economic questions. May I just ask, though, you're a devout Catholic. You certainly would support him in his support of the pro-life agenda, and you would disagree with somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who's in favor of abortion up to the 9th month, right?
Yes, I do. I have 5 children, 12 grandchildren.
God bless you.
And I have grandchildren that go to the Catholic school in Chippewa Falls.
Great. No,
but I do not agree with our church getting involved in any sort of politics.
Well, they aren't getting involved in politics, but you have politicians in their right place, Catholic laymen getting involved in politics, which is the role of Catholic laymen, not churchmen. And Archbishop Dolan was very clear in his letter to Paul Ryan. He said, bishops are not politicians, nor should they be.
Right.
And he didn't bless this plan. He simply said, this is a wonderful contribution to the dialogue, and within prudential judgment, elected officials could decide that this is good or that another path is good. That's the church's way always. It's not their affair.
The Second Vatican Council was emphatic about lay people doing precisely the kind of thing that Paul Ryan is doing.
No, he's in the public square doing what he said.
Now we have to wish Raymond a happy birthday.
No, not me. We have to wish Father Sirico a happy birthday. You want to sing along, guys?
No,
happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Don't you like the nice cake we got you? Happy birthday, Father Sirico. Happy birthday to you. Blow it out. All right.
30 years old again.
30 years. How do you like that? Is this your first pass or your second? Okay. Father Robert Sirico, happy birthday. For more on Father Robert and his work at the Acton Institute, visit acton.org. Up next, we'll talk to columnist Joan Frawley Desmond about the latest developments in the case of Father John Corapi, the black sheepdog. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Not going to be involved in public ministry as a priest any longer. So for now, God bless you, God love you, and goodbye. John Corapi, once called Father, now simply the Black Sheepdog.
That is an excerpt from Father Corapi's website where he announced his retreat from public ministry. It's a perplexing and sad case. And in March of this year, the power preacher who regularly appeared on this network was placed on administrative leave by his order in the wake of allegations of misconduct by one of his former employees. An investigation was undertaken by his religious community, SALT, the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity, and just last week he announced on his website that he is leaving priestly ministry. For so many of us who knew Father John, this is both a shock and a puzzlement. Let me say up front that none of us can speak to the veracity of these charges and accusations against him, and we only wish him the best, and we just don't have the information. But with his decision to leave priestly ministry, Father Corapi has effectively ended the internal investigation. So we may never know whether he's innocent or guilty of these charges. With so much chatter on the internet and elsewhere about this case, I wanted to bring on a reporter who has been covering this story since it broke. She's one of the few people offering not opinion, but fresh reportage on the story. She serves as senior editor of the National Catholic Register, recently acquired by EWTN. Please welcome to the program, Joan Frawley Desmond. Joan, thanks for being here.
It's nice to
Pleasure
be here,
to see
Raymond.
you. Thank you.
Happy to be
Let's get into this, Joan. You spoke with the superior, Father John Corapi's superior, Father Jerry Sheehan. What is the relationship between Father Corapi and SALT? Is he in community with them?
Father Corapi was not living in community. That much we know. But he explained, and both Father Corapi has said so, and Father Jerry Sheehan, his superior at SALT, he's the regional priest servant of SALT, said that from the beginning, when Father first became involved with SALT, the founder, Father James Flanagan, discerned very special gift as an evangelizer in Father Corapi. He also said that he felt that he needed to be in spiritual solitude, that he needed to be in deep prayer, and he understood and accepted that Father Corapi needed to be to some degree apart, but in deep prayer. So for a while he was in a community of nuns. He lived in a hermetic existence on the compound there. And then over time he moved into his own home. So that was approved at the beginning. However, the Constitution was then subsequently approved for SALT. In the new Constitution, members of the order were supposed to become then in conformity, which meant they had to take certain vows, including vows of poverty, and they were supposed to move towards a community life. So that was kind of a work in progress when he joined, and then that was established. However, Father Sheehan told me some time ago when the story first broke, and we've spoke about it since, that there were several priests and perhaps others in the order for whom this was an evolving process, and it was not yet resolved. So they seem to be working on it, I think would be the way you could describe it.
Now, in this case, Father Corapi has maintained that the Bishop of Corpus Christi, quote, ordered his superiors against their will and against their better judgment to start this process of investigation and to place him on administrative leave. Is that the case?
This is Father Corapi's assertion. His superior said that basically he was in consultation with the bishop, but that it was a decision of the order, as would be the case, to investigate any such charges or allegations and look into them. So yes, they consulted with the bishop. I can't tell you, because I wasn't there, who initiated the original decision. What I do know is that in the initial case that involved the allegations, the individual who raised those allegations did send a letter to several bishops. So it could make sense if she had sent this letter, if that's true, and again, we don't know very much. If that is true, then it could be that the bishop contacted the order. This is speculation. I have no way to confirm all the details of that.
Now, Father John was invited back into the community, though. I was told that recently they were going to offer him an assignment, and they wanted him to come and live in community.
Right.
He did not take them up on that offer, I suppose.
Yes, and I spoke with Father Jerry Sheehan about that recently. I asked him again. He said the order really wants Father Corapi back in community. They want to have him with them in community.
What would that mean? What would that mean, coming into community?
Well, that's the question. And so Father Sheehan said, and I quote this in my story, he said it would mean for Father Corapi giving up everything. I think the everything he didn't specify, but I think what it means is he would not be living in his own home. I know that Santa Cruz Media, and again, I'm not sure the status of Santa Cruz Media at this point, but it would mean that that would be, the revenue for that would go to the order, and I'm not sure where it's going right now, but that would be what it would mean. So maybe that's a work in progress as well.
It seems to be a privately held company at the moment.
It appears to be. And Raymond, an interesting part about covering this whole event is at first I feel like it's a bit of a moving target. This is a breaking story. We're still getting new information. Number two, for the Register, we're getting comments from readers who've been checking things out. We're going online and seeing blog posts both by Father on his own new site. We're seeing information on other sites. So new information is being generated, as well as speculation and commentary. It's very hard to separate out which is which.
Well, that's what I liked about your reportage. It is reportage. It's facts. It's not speculation. You're not opining on this. You're simply reporting the facts as they come in and garnering new facts. So I thank you for that. And I'll hold you over. We're going to include Joan on our after show. We'll continue talking about the Father Corapi case, as well as take some of your questions. You can read Joan's columns at ncregister.com. As I mentioned earlier, the National Catholic Register is now a service of EWTN. To learn how to get a free trial of the Register, visit EWTN.com. And please keep Father John and all accused priests in your prayers, as well as their accusers. That's all the time we have until next week. You can find news updates, and I offer plenty throughout the week, and the occasional commentary by following me on Twitter or on my Facebook page. Just go to RaymondArroyo.com. You can click through from there. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure to catch the after show. It's at EWTN.com. Go to the news page. You'll see it. See you next time. Bye now. Thank you.